Welcome to another episode of the Tech Vault with Mitchell Sellers. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about .NET upgrades and how to make sure that you're getting the best new features or making sure that your projects are really, truly ready to go and up to the latest standards. One of the things that we continue to see in the space is that our progress is faster than it's ever been. Whether you want to call it because of AI or because of other tech innovation doesn't really matter. But the key is really that we are seeing movement that is going faster and faster and faster than we've ever seen in the past. And one of the things that I see with teams is that the process of managing the upgrades, how do you go from .NET Core 8 or ASP.NET Core 8 to ASP.NET Core 9 to ASP.NET Core 10, all of those different things, it's like, okay, yep, I updated the NuGet packages. I did I did the thing. I did what I was supposed to do. Um, However, it's not really the greatest long term to just go that route. And what's really interesting is exactly how you go about doing it or what you want to go do. And I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit today, just to kind of help show what I do to help make sure that when you do a .NET upgrade, that you're getting the latest and greatest features, that you're following, the current standards, that kind of thing, just to make sure that we're really truly able to do what we need to do with our projects and use the best technology available to us. So just diving in, if we go out and look at the releases and the release notes that happen, we'll see that we have a overwhelming amount of information that's put out at our disposal. So if we're using ASP.NET Core, whether that be Blazor, MVC, or otherwise, we have what's new in ASP.NET Core 10 in .NET 10. If we're using Entity Framework, we have a what's new in Entity Framework Core 10. We have a generic what's new in .NET 10 overall. So as you can see, things get really complicated fairly quickly. So as we look through here, just starting with Entity Framework is a great example. Okay, so what's new? We can just kind of scroll down from the top here. Azure SQL, SQL Server, Vector Search support. I'm not doing anything vector support, no big deal. Oh, JSON type support. Oh, okay, that could be a really big deal. Now, what do we do here, right? One of the biggest things here is this is a are you using this feature? Are you not using this feature? Running through the documentation like this is kind of an important thing. Azure Cosmos, we're in hybrid search. Okay, we're not right. So at the end of the day, we can start to look at, okay, do we need to worry about different things? So for example, here's our additional JSON items. Like this is really cool. Rather than having a JSON piece, we have the ability to, have a complex object go to a JSON column, and then we can do all kinds of fancy fun stuff. Awesome. Um, Complex types linked to SQL transitions. This is one of the things that are really, really interesting from my perspective is that sometimes you don't fully understand, right, what's going to happen. So by the way that things work, right, we end up running into some situations where we may get different behaviors, right? So like this is a change in behavior for parameterized collections. These are things that maybe don't require changes to you at this point, but what they do require is that they require you to update your understanding and make sure that you are, really able to validate things along the way. So, for example, if you end up doing things, in your way differently, you're going to have to make some of these decisions along the way. So the fun thing here is you want to validate, okay, I want to make sure that I know this is what's going on, that kind of thing. So there's not a lot I can do to make this process better, right? You need to go and read these notes. You need to go and validate what's going on and really look for where might I benefit, right? So for example, you know, oh, coalesce is null. Okay, that could be really good. SQLite improvements, that kind of thing. So like we have to really look at like what is different for us here. Um, Not as much of like an instant, okay, this is great, especially when it comes down to the entity framework side of things. But at the same time, right, we need to really make sure that we understand, what we're doing, what is able to be done, and we have to validate each of those pieces, each of those parts of the upgrade process. We have to validate um, along the way. So it is really important, right, to include this as part of your overall steps from, one version to another, trying to figure out those differences along the way. Now, let's go look at ASP.NET Core a little bit. This is where things get a little bit more interesting. Okay, so we have new security samples. Well, why do we care about the samples? Well, the biggest thing with these samples is that these are the point in time and they update them over time, right? Examples of the right way to do things, right? So the Blazor team, for example, they update, and create new templates that allow you to, understand what they're looking to do. And so knowing that they made some big updates here, this gives us a little bit of a hint of some things that we can do to make this process a little bit better. They also talk a little bit about being able to put the Blazor script as a static asset rather than being an embedded resource. Couple of little notes here, some changes in behavior. Again, not a big deal. Ignore the creation fragment when things are done. That's great. Quick grid, response streaming, client side fingerprinting if you want to from an asset perspective. Blazor apps, doing some preload. There's definitely some interesting things here. Set the environment in WASM apps. Boot configuration inlined again for WASM is one of those things. So as you go through here, right, all kinds of things that could be happening that could be important for you that may end up being, a different thing. There's some different metrics, there's some identity metrics, there's some, you know, redirects that it is fixing and suppressing and doing other things. One of the biggest things that I see with all of this is, oh my goodness, there's so many things. Well, how can we make that process a little bit better? Well, I've got one of our projects and I kind of show you a few of the things that I do just to make this process a little bit easier. So this is one of our own projects. It's an internal project. And this project was upgraded um, from .NET 9 into .NET 10. And you can see that we have some things in here. And so we use identity with individual user accounts. And one of the things that always annoys me is that when you do a login, the identity redirect manager that you get, it does this redirect to, and then there's this fun little comment that's been here. During static rendering, navigate to throws an exception, which is handled by the framework as a redirect. So as long as this is called from a statically uh, rendered identity component, the exception is never thrown. Okay, been a thing, always been a thing. As you run your application, you get ready to do your debug process. If I go and sign out, the second that I try to log in, boom, we get this exception. It's not a great developer experience if you have good login in place. It's not a great experience overall. But it's been a thing, right? It works, the application works, there's no impact to the end users, so we've let it go. Well, this is one of those things that has changed in the most recent versions of .NET is they've added, and modified the behavior, but you have to opt in. So what I've done is I went out and created a brand new clean template example of our type of project with identity and user accounts enabled. Now I have the updated redirect manager in this project, and as you can see here, there is not any of that comment in here or anything like that because of some of the things that were being done. So one of the things that I've found is the easiest way to kind of get started with some of this is I know this is an area that changed. So let's go quickly take a look at this file and do a compare with and go out to our upgrade demo project that we just created. Go into our individual uh, components, go into our account component, go to our redirect manager. So now I'm able to kind of see some differences here. Okay, so we have some old using statements that maybe aren't needed. There's some code analysis things that we have that it didn't have, of like does not return, um, is one of those things. But then notice here, now we've got this difference. So they remove the invalid operation, they remove that. Okay, so easy enough. Let's bring our code into sync with the updated code. Remove that comment, go ahead and remove this. But the other thing is that we know that we have to opt into that feature. So this is one of those other areas where if we go in and take a look at our actual project itself, and if you read the documentation, you'll see kind of where some of these configurations are, but I don't necessarily care. What I want to do is I want to do a quick look, right? Okay, so we have a target framework, we have nullable, enable, implicit usings. Oh, Blazor disable throw navigation exception true. That looks curious. Let's go grab that real quick. Let's go back to our project. Go ahead and edit its project file. And if you notice here, we have a runtime identifier, part of what we do for publishing, no big deal. We don't have that setting in there for Blazor disable throw navigation. So now let's go ahead and run our application. We made those two changes. We synchronized those pieces. Now, do we have something that is going to have a little bit better effect? Okay, go ahead and log in. I'm in debug mode, just like what we were before. And now if you notice, I log in, I didn't get a breakpoint, I didn't get an exception. I've made my life that much easier. Now, this is where things get complicated, right? How much time do I spend in this? How much energy do I spend? And this is where, as we start working with customizations, one of the things that I find is that if we're using some of the boilerplate items, staying consistent, especially in certain scenarios, really, really helps us out. When we go and look at differences, for example, in some of the identity um, behaviors, right? There is definitely some things that are really good, like identity revalidating authentication handle. This is another great example of something that we leverage, inside of our project as part of the defaults for um, a Blazor project. We may want to validate that, okay, we have the same behavior. So we can do the same thing here. We can go into our components, we can go to our account, and then we can validate that, okay, we don't necessarily have any big differences, right? Our namespace is different, our our identity user object is different, but we're the same. So as much as it's great that we use identity, it's amazing that we bring in all of these different things. Sometimes just taking this time to do a side-by-side comparison, quickly look at, what's my new project template look like versus what did I have before, becomes a really good level set for some of the things that you might need to do. You know, this includes things like, let's look at our app.razor um, and see, are there differences here? So in this case, right, our app.razor, we've got some, we have some items in here. This is going to be a little bit more cluttered if we go and do the comparison with the diff, but let's go ahead and do it anyway, just to kind of show a point, especially with the diff tools getting smarter and smarter. We might spot some differences here that we weren't necessarily expecting. So we have our own style sheet differences, but notice that there's this resource preloader. Okay, well, not a lot of harm in doing that. So let's go ahead and bring that over, into our project, because If there is anything that it wants to preload, we might as well let it go ahead and do that kind of thing, right? So that looks great. We have, our scripts over here, which makes sense. We have our own fave icon versus theirs, no big deal. Our page render mode is here. Okay, that's great. But then notice here, oh, I just discovered two new things, right? It's loading the Blazor resource as a static asset, right? Using assets gives us a better behavior, gives us the ability to auto cache bust and everything else. But then notice this reconnect modal. Two things that definitely look really curious. So let's go ahead, grab these two things as well, and let's go back over to uh, our application and let's update those. Now, obviously, we're going to get an error because reconnect modal doesn't exist. So let's go to our demo project that we did. We'll go into our layout and we have our reconnect modal. I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. Now, notice that there is a CSS file and a JS file with that. So we're going to go ahead and copy that all at once. And then I'm going to go back over to my particular project, go into our layout section, drop that in here. So what's in here? Oh, well, this is kind of cool. Have you ever had the Signal R connection disconnect on its own? It needs to reconnect and, had the darndest time trying to figure out how to style it? Well, by golly, look at this. This is the components, the reconnect modal. This has all of the classes in it. This has the content. Here's right here. Oh, first attempt visible, rejoining the server. Oh, rejoin failed, etc. So now I have control over what that reconnect model looks like, right? And so this, along with its own module itself, right? So here's its JS that it wants you to be able to, to be able to do here as well with its constants and eventing and that kind of thing. Okay, great. I have a good example of what I can do. I now also know some of the things that it wants, done. How does it want to go through life? How does it want me to, reference everything on its side? So if I go and I run the application, right, I've got no necessarily visible changes. If I go and do something here, because if I stop debugging, we're gonna get a different get a different error here. But I'll go ahead and log in an incognito window. And then we're going to come back over here and I'm going to close out of here, which is going to effectively stop debugging. We have, right, some of our ability here to control everything that is going on within our individual displays. And so one of the biggest things, for us is like we want to make sure that we're able to, you know, control what is happening within our project. We have the ability to then update the styles, change the things that we don't like. Makes life just a little bit easier for us along the way to be able to control and manage our user experience in a much more clean way. So as kind of a prime example, using things like this to go through and step section by section, area by area through, oh, this is what's different, and validating. It's a little bit of a tedious process, but at the same time, it's one of those things that the more effort that you put in that initial setup, the better off you're going to be. Another great example is there were changes in um, things that are supported with the router and routing behaviors. So if we go in and look at the routes.razor, You can see now that there is this support for a not found page, which is a really, really good thing to make sure that you get a good overall, not found page for the individual, user that ends up doing something. So then now you could go through and do the same kind of thing on your side, right? I could create, you know, in this project, for example, as it is today, if I go in and do something silly, right? Well, that's kind of ugly, right? Not exactly what I'm looking for. If I go in here, I can come in and create a page. Let's go ahead and just add a component. We'll call this not found. I do want to make sure that it uses my proper layout, but I want to use, we have two different layouts in our case. We have a login layout that is a protected thing that doesn't really show anything. So we'll use that one. And then basically we can do with our own individual behavior here, we have a login layout header component. It's just part of our own little template process. Um, oops, no content. And then we can do something like this to be able to say, we are sorry, nothing to see here. So now I've got something that's kind of ready to be able to do things. I can come in here and do a not found if I do it the correct location. So I get for doing things real. So now we do a not found page, type of pages. Don't let AI get too far with you there. Pages dot not found. With that small change, because that's one of those new features, it was in the release notes that we have support for not found page. And I apologize, need to have the route it needs to be a true page so that we have it out there. So do that as not found. Run that one more time. Now, if I go in here and I try to go to silly, eventually be able to get that going. So I'm not sure what I messed up there, but I apologize here. I will take a look at that from a routing perspective. But if we do other things, if we have our individual places where we return a not found result, we can continue to update those. If you use Navigation Manager, it will forcefully look in there as well. So again, live demos. I hate to do a little bit too much crazy stuff there, but at the end of the day, we really have some ability here to compare and contrast. And using these templates is probably one of the fastest ways to go out and take a look at, what do we want to do? How do we want to manage it? I encourage you to do a similar thing too. Look at, were there changes in what was injected or how things were orchestrated, how identity was added, are there new options, new configurations that, needs to, determine what's going on? Do we need to require confirmed accounts? Like each of these things really set up some of those key things that we're looking for. Some of our similar things we've always seen, HSTS and status code, pages with re-execute, anti-forgery, interactive server render mode, all of these kinds of things. There may be some changes along the way. Always good to kind of validate. Um, I hope this helps. Upgrades are always fun. It's just a great way to be able to try to make it at least a little bit easier, stay up with the documentation. As always, love to see your experiences, what you've had, what's gone great for you, what hasn't, as you've done your various upgrades, and hope this has been helpful. Love to see you here on another episode of the Tech Vault. And please do subscribe if you haven't. That way you get notified of each of the new pieces of content that we have coming your way. Thank you very much.